When I returned home after a month-long business trip, my wife, Anna, insisted on a divorce. She told me she had found true love, someone who could give her unparalleled tenderness. Later, I pulled some strings to investigate the man she had fallen for. He was a con artist. So, I signed the divorce papers without hesitation. I had sensed something was off with Anna even while I was away. She used to call me every hour whenever I traveled for work. My colleagues would tease me, saying I was henpecked. But this time, in an entire month, she never called me once. Even when I called her. Our conversations barely lasted a minute. The baby's crying. I'm about to sleep. Excuses. Every time. When I finally made it home, exhausted from the long journey, dinner was already on the table, just like always. The only difference was the divorce papers neatly placed beside the dishes. I sat down, calmly setting the plates like I always did. Can you tell me what's going on? I met someone, Anna replied evenly. In this past month, he's given me a kind of tenderness I never knew existed. We talk every day. When I wake up in the middle of the night, even the slightest sound from me gets a response from him. He makes me feel young again, like I'm reliving the days of passionate love. Not like this. Not like us. Anna didn't stop there. Right in front of me, at our dinner table, she unraveled the story of my inadequacies, listing every way he had outshone me. I don't know how long she spoke. The sky outside had darkened by the time she was done. I won't be staying here tonight. Get some rest, she said, stepping into her red high heels. Her face set with determination. I watched as she walked out without looking back. I understood then there was no point in trying to hold on. So, I simply nodded. Come home tomorrow. We'll go to court together. Anna, my wife, used to spend her nights drowning in liquor and neon lights, wasting away her youth in bars. Until I pulled her out of that mess. I had been entertaining clients that night when she lost a drinking game and ended up at our table, looking for a free drink. She was stunning, effortlessly captivating. One of my clients, eyes gleaming, waved his hand and ordered an entire round just for her. She didn't even flinch. She just popped open a bottle and downed it like water. Anna could outdrink an entire table of grown men. All except me. Later, she added me on social media, saying she hadn't expected me to hold my liquor so well. She invited me out for drinks more than once. I never went there once, but occasionally I would pick her up when she was drunk and take her home. One night, she collapsed in the back seat of my car and asked me why I didn't join her since I could drink so well. Alcohol's no good. I only drink when I have to. Otherwise, I don't touch the stuff, I said plainly. She went quiet after that, as if she had passed out. But from that night on, she stopped drinking. She turned over a new leaf. She became part of my life. We got to know each other, fell in love, got married. I thought she had changed for good. But I had forgotten one thing: people don't really change. Henry. It's confirmed. Anna fell for a con artist. Attached was a file. Chris had been my childhood friend, now a private investigator. I had hired him for this case half a month ago. I glanced at the message, tucked my child in, and walked into the living room alone. Lighting a cigarette, I opened the file. It was extensive, pages filled with text, images, and undeniable proof. Turns out, Anna had met her lover, George, long before my business trip. They had simply never found the opportunity to meet in person. The moment I left, they wasted no time getting together. Chris was meticulous in his work. His report even included photos of Anna and George making out in public. In one of them, they were locked in a passionate embrace at the entrance of a movie theater. George's hands roamed freely over her body. I kept scrolling, feeling an unfamiliar sense of sorrow creeping in. It had been a long time since I'd experienced that kind of intimacy. With a deep sigh, I put out my cigarette and opened the section detailing Georges' background. A seasoned con artist. His specialty? Preying on married women. Wrecking their families, and then making himself at home in their lives, siphoning off their wealth. Just as I was processing this, Chris sent another message. "Henry, my guy says Anna checked into a hotel with him again today. Want me to intervene? I can make her come home." Attached was another photo, Anna and George, arms wrapped around each other, entering a hotel. I stared at my phone screen, frozen. I had expected this. I had braced myself. Yet, seeing the evidence laid out so plainly still felt like a punch to the gut. I lit another cigarette. Then another. Images flashed through my mind, scenes of our past, our marriage, her laughter, her betrayal. I wasn't sure which were real and which were just fragments of my imagination. After what felt like an eternity, I picked up my phone and typed my reply. "Thanks, Chris. Tell your guy to stand down. I'll send over the rest of your payment tomorrow. I appreciate everything you've done." The next afternoon, Anna texted me. She was already at the courthouse. Waiting. I brought the divorce papers and headed over. It was over in a flash. Anna walked away with half my assets, a substantial sum, enough to ensure she'd never have to worry about money for the rest of her life. Assuming nothing went wrong. Ironically, when they asked about custody, we both answered at the same time, "Pete stays with me. Pete stays with him." I turned to look at Anna. She was already watching me. In her eyes, I saw unwavering resolve. For the sake of her so-called true love, she was willing to give up everything. As we walked out of the courthouse, I invited her for one last conversation at a nearby cafe. Sitting across from her, I placed my phone on the table and pulled up the file on George. "Out of respect for what we once had, I think you should see this," I said, sending her the full report. Anna scrolled through it, then suddenly chuckled. She looked up at me with undisguised mockery. "Henry, what a waste of talent, you should have been a screenwriter. You think I'd believe this nonsense? I know exactly what kind of man he is. Sure, he doesn't have money now, but that doesn't mean he won't in the future. A con artist? Do I look like an idiot to you?" For a moment, I had no words. I merely studied the woman who had once been my wife. Anna was beyond saving. Although I had lost all interest in the conversation, Anna was just getting started. "Do you even know how good he is to me?" She scoffed. "When he /s with me, I'm the only one he sees. Not like you, stealing glances at other women and pretending it's nothing. He cherishes me every second of the day. And you? You're always too busy with work. You barely talk to me anymore, let alone care." I had heard enough. "He's putting on an act. Anna. Anyone can pretend. You think our marriage lost its spark, that it's become routine, but that's normal. It's real life. If you were unhappy, you should have talked to me. Not cheated on me." Anna's expression darkened. Her eyes burned with frustration as she suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. I gave birth to your child. I've done more than enough for you. Now, I want my own life. Stop trying to hold me back. And don't think I don't see through you. You're always scheming, even now, you're still trying to trick me." Scheming? Me? I had no words. Overcome with emotion, Anna grabbed her cup and threw her coffee at me. The steaming liquid drenched my shirt, sending a murmur through the cafe. She stormed out without looking back. All around me, strangers cast sympathetic glances at my soaked clothes. I watched her retreating figure and shook my head in silence. The most absurd mistake of my life? Marrying Anna. When I got home, Chris was already there, standing by my door with 2 bottles of whiskey. "Drink?" he asked, raising one bottle with a knowing smirk. I chuckled, unlocking the door and letting him in. Chris had known me since we were kids. He knew I rarely drank, only when I had to. But he also knew that tonight, I needed a drink. A few glasses in, the storm inside me started to settle. I patted Chris on the shoulder. "Are you interested in preparing for your next job?" At the mention of business, Chris sobered up slightly. He studied me with cautious eyes. "Henry, you're divorced now. Maybe it's time to move on." I laughed, shaking my head. "Relax. I have no intention of meddling in Anna's life anymore. She and I are done. We owe each other nothing." Chris let out a relieved sigh. He thumped his chest in reassurance. "Good. You name the target, and he'll dig up everything there is to know. Who do you want me to look into?" I was silent for a moment. I dipped my finger into my wine and traced a name onto the wooden table. "George." "All right. He'll take the job. I never liked that bastard anyway. No way he's been running his game this long without slipping up." His grin sharpened. "The moment he makes a mistake, well, hit him with the full force of justice." I looked at my oldest friend, his eyes gleaming with righteous excitement, and burst into laughter. "To justice. To revenge. Cheers." Chris and I began digging into George's background. As it turned out, George wasn't just a run-off-the-mill con artist, he had an entire team supporting him. When we uncovered this, even Chris, a private investigator, was stunned. George's operation was like a well-oiled machine. Some members of his team specialized in combing through social media platforms to find potential targets, while others devised detailed strategies. Everything from tailored scripts to elaborate personas was meticulously planned by designated team members. "Henry, this is tricky. There are a lot of them. Luckily, their counter-surveillance skills are pretty weak, or we'd have nothing to go on," Chris muttered, flipping through the files with a frown. "Tricky or not, we have to see this through. Work's slow at my company right now, so I can pitch in," I replied. From the evidence we had so far, we learned that George's previous victim had been financially ruined, eventually ending up in a mental institution. It was horrifying. Chris nodded thoughtfully before glancing at me. "That case might be tough to crack. How about we use Anna to gather evidence? It'd make things easier." "Fine by me. Do whatever you need to build the case," I said without hesitation. Chris grinned slyly. "Actually, we've already made some progress. One of my guys hacked into their internal system and found the strategy they're using on Anna. According to the plan, George is going to propose soon. He'll sweet-talk her into putting her money into a joint account. Once that's done, he'll claim he needs the funds for a business venture and start funneling the money out, transferring marital assets into his own pockets. If we don't act, Anna will soon lose both her love and her money. But on the bright side, it'll give us the evidence we need." As Chris finished explaining, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Anna. "I'm getting married next week. Will you come?" I typed my reply without hesitation, "Of course." After setting my phone down, I turned to Chris. "They've made their move. You need to move faster too." My voice was calm, but my resolve was firm. I want them to know there's no escaping justice. I attended Anna's wedding. Perhaps knowing I'd be there, they went all out with the ceremony. It was held at the most luxurious hotel in the city. Anna had me seated at the edge of the room, far from the action. My table was supposedly filled with George's relatives. But as I glanced around, I recognized one of the men beside me, a member of Georges' team. The atmosphere was lively. Anna beamed with joy as she and George made their grand entrance, hand in hand, under the host's narration. On the large screen, a montage of their beautiful life together played. There were clips of them traveling, silhouetted against stunning landscapes, watching sunrises and sunsets. Every frame was dripping with love and happiness. Anna looked radiant, her face lit up with a smile so genuine it could fool anyone. I almost laughed. This was all an illusion, carefully crafted lies woven into a perfect fairy tale. What a flawless marriage, wouldn't you agree? The man beside me raised his glass, nudging me. I picked up my glass of soda and raised it in response. He didn't seem to mind, downing his drink in one gulp. Truly perfect, I said, my tone laced with subtle irony. The man chuckled, giving me a knowing, almost mocking look. I met his gaze evenly, my expression calm, even amused. It didn't take long for him to shift his attention elsewhere, turning to chat with someone else. After that, no one else bothered to engage with me. So, I spent the rest of the wedding sitting quietly, sipping my drink, watching the charade unfold. In the midst of all the noise and celebration, I sat alone, observing this grand spectacle. George strutted over to my table, dragging Anna along with him. "Henry, nice to finally meet you." I had seen photos of George before, but this was our first encounter in person. I gave him a slow nod, barely an acknowledgement. George didn't seem to mind. His smile remained intact as he picked up a large glass of whiskey and extended it toward me. "I heard from Anna that you don't drink, but today is our wedding day. How about making an exception?" I didn't even pretend to consider it. Instead, I simply raised my glass of soda. The message was clear: who the hell do you think you are, expecting me to toast you? For a moment, Georges' smile faltered. Then, recovering quickly, he chuckled. "Drinking soda is fine too." Anna, standing beside him, wore a scowl. Her voice was sharp as she snapped, "Henry, can't you be a little more magnanimous?" "Magnanimous?" I chuckled, a slow, deliberate smile playing at my lips. "Sorry, but this is just who I am." Anna's eyes filled with contempt. "You're just jealous that I found something better. What, do you think you'll ever find someone as good as me?" I downed the rest of my drink, smacked my lips, and scoffed. "You? Good? Don't flatter yourself. You." Anna's face flushed with anger. But with so many eyes on us, she swallowed it down. "Today is my wedding day, so I won't hold this against you." She took a deep breath before adding, "You'll see, Henry. I'm going to be so much happier without you." I pushed back my chair and stood. "Maybe." Without another word, I turned and walked away. Watching her sink deeper into the mess she created wasn't even satisfying, it was just pathetic. After my divorce, my friends wasted no time trying to set me up with someone new. I wasn't in a rush. For the sake of courtesy, I'd occasionally accept a treat the woman to dinner, and see if there was anything worth pursuing. There never was. At home, I hired an experienced and responsible nanny to take care of my son. Meanwhile, Chris would often drop by with updates on our case. Georges' plan was moving along beautifully, for him, at least. Anna, completely oblivious, had already transferred her entire fortune into Georges' account. Chris had hacked into their internal communication system, and Georges' crew was practically celebrating. They were already making plans for an extravagant overseas vacation, part getaway, part cooling off period. The moment Chris sent me screenshots of their conversation, I couldn't stop laughing. A prison cell would be their only vacation destination. Chris had compiled a full dossier of their crimes. The moment they made their final move, he'd turn everything over to the police. Anna remained blissfully ignorant, continuing to send me smug messages. He loves me more than you ever did. He understands women. You deserve to die alone. She even sent pictures of their happy life together. I ignored her texts, but I did enjoy scrolling through Georges' private chats. She's dumb, loaded, and easy to manipulate. That was how they described Anna. Reading those words only reinforced how important it was to marry the right person. Over time, Anna's messages became less about showing off and more about pure insults. To be honest, it was getting annoying. If I weren't waiting to see how this all played out, I would have blocked her ages ago. 6 months later, I realized how much lighter I felt without Anna weighing me down. My career took off. My life regained its balance. Then, out of nowhere, a message from Anna appeared on my screen late one night. "How's Pete? I want to come home and see him." Pete. My son's name. Staring at Anna's message, a sense of unease crept over me. I immediately took a screenshot and called Chris. "Are they making their move? She says she wants to see Pete." Chris instantly understood who I meant. His voice turned serious. "Henry, whatever you do, don't agree. George has already transferred most of the money. Anna might be catching on." I frowned. She only realized after losing most of it? Exactly. Honestly, I've seen some dumb marks, but Anna takes the cake. Chris paused, then quickly added, "But Henry. Everyone has moments of bad judgment." I had nothing to say to that. I was still ashamed of my own past choices. "How's the evidence collection going? Do we have enough solid proof?" I asked. Chris sounded confident. "Don't worry. We'll have enough soon. They're in the middle of asset transfers, and they're making mistakes left and right." That was reassuring. Still, I wasn't just worried about Anna losing her money. I was worried about her coming after me once she realized she'd been conned. I knew Anna well enough; she would find a way to use Pete against me. To prepare for the worst, I asked Chris to connect me with a solid lawyer. Just as I hung up, another message from Anna popped up. "Henry, why aren't you replying? I'm coming to see Pete tomorrow." My grip on the phone tightened. I typed back immediately, "Pete is fine. But don't come back. It took you 6 months to remember Pete, and now you have the audacity to come back and see him?" The next day, I wasted no time. I bought a move-in-ready apartment in another neighborhood, packed up, and relocated with Pete before Anna could show up. After settling in, I met with Emily, the lawyer Chris had recommended. She was experienced and efficient. "Mr. Henry, I've reviewed your case. Rest assured, the divorce agreement clearly states that you have full custody of Pete." Emily flipped through the documents as she spoke. "On top of that, your financial situation is far superior to your ex-wife's, so you have nothing to worry about. Even if she tries to take this to court, we will win." That was a relief. "That's good to hear. But what about visitations? Can I legally refuse to let her see Pete?" Emily hesitated. "Unfortunately, that's difficult. Anna has visitation rights. Unless you can prove that her presence would be harmful to the child." "Harmful?" I frowned, deep in thought. After wrapping up our legal discussion, I insisted on treating Emily to dinner as a thank you. She had to pick up her daughter from school, so I offered to drive them both and take them to one of my usual restaurants. Halfway through dinner, out of nowhere, Anna appeared. She stood there, arms crossed, a smirk plastered on her face. "Henry, it's only been 6 months since the divorce, and you already have a new girlfriend?" Her eyes flicked to Emily and her daughter. "You already had Pete. And now you're picking up another woman with a kid? What is this, a charity home?" I shot an apologetic glance at Emily, but she seemed completely unfazed, as if Anna's outburst didn't affect her in the slightest. Relieved, I immediately stood up and dragged Anna a few steps away. "Can you stop making a scene? Be reasonable for once." "Reasonable? Are you saying I'm being unreasonable?" Her voice rose, drawing attention from nearby diners. "You had the nerve to move without telling me, but now you won't even let me see Pete? I want to see my son. You have no right to stop me." I clenched my fists. "Do you really want to see Pete, or are you just using him as an excuse to ask for money?" Anna's expression flickered, but she quickly recovered. "Fine. If money is what you're worried about, just give me some. I won't ask for much, how about a few $100,000? Just enough to get by. If you refuse, I'll take this to court and fight for custody." She wasn't even trying to be subtle. "Keep dreaming. Even if I had the money to spare, I wouldn't give you a dime. We're divorced. I never even asked you for child support, and now you have the audacity to ask me for money?" At the mention of child support, Anna's confidence wavered. She scowled but didn't argue. "George's business failed. He needs money. Who else am I supposed to turn to? George drained your bank account, and now you expect me, your ex-husband, to bail you out?" I was about to respond when Emily, now standing by the door with her daughter, glanced back at me and said casually, "Mr. Henry, thank you for dinner. Oh, and as your lawyer, I should remind you of something. Your divorce agreement doesn't specify visitation rights, meaning, until the court makes a ruling. You have every right to refuse." Anna's face twisted in rage. "What kind of bullshit is that? He's my child. Why the hell do I need a court ruling just to see him?" She lunged forward, hands reaching for Emily. I instinctively moved to intervene, but Emily was faster. With a small step to the side, she casually lifted her foot, and Anna went sprawling to the floor. Emily smiled faintly. "You should watch your step. Be more careful next time." Emily gave me a polite nod before walking out with her daughter. I didn't even glance at Anna. I quickly followed Emily, insisting on driving her home. A few days later, as expected, I received a court summons. Anna was officially suing me for custody. On the day of the hearing, George approached me before the trial started. He got straight to the point. "Henry, my business took a hit. I need some funds to get back on my feet. If you help me out, I'll convince Anna to drop the case. Honestly, I think Pete is better off with you anyway." I couldn't help but laugh. Chris had already briefed me on George's situation. He and his crew had completely drained Anna's finances. Now, instead of cutting ties, they were trying to squeeze money out of me before disappearing for good. Not interested. See you in court. I walked away, leaving him fuming. During the trial, Emily was impeccable as my attorney. She presented overwhelming evidence proving that Anna's financial situation made her entirely unfit for custody. The court ruled in my favor on the spot, immediately dismissing Anna's claim. A decisive victory. Later, I heard that Anna intended to appeal. I wasn't concerned. Emily had already assured me that my custody rights were secure. And according to Chris, George was about to cut ties with Anna for good. Once that happened, she wouldn't stand a chance at regaining custody. With all the chaos behind me, I shifted my full focus to work. And before long, my career took off like never before. Everything was finally moving in the right direction. When I saw Anna again, I barely recognized her. Her once stunning beauty remained, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her features. "Henry, I was wrong. George really was a con artist. First, he took all my money. Then, he told me he had to go on a business trip and never came back. Lenders started showing up at my door. Turns out, George had used my identity to take out massive loans. I have nowhere left to go. Let's get back together, okay? I swear. This time it'll be good to you and Pete. He'll never make the same mistake again. She rushed toward me the moment I stepped out of my office. I dodged her immediately. I wanted nothing to do with this woman anymore. She was nothing but trouble. We're divorced. We have nothing to do with each other. I got into my car without a shred of emotion on my face. Anna went crazy, pounding on my window. Don't do this, Henry. You saved me once before, you can do it again. Please, let me in. Just hear me out. I know I messed up. But I felt nothing. Without hesitation, I started the engine and pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her collapse onto the pavement, sobbing hysterically. Her dress was stained with mud. She wasn't wrong, I could have helped her. I had the means. I used to think she was worth saving, which is why I reached out to help her. But this time, I finally understood, she is beyond saving. Some time later, Chris sent me a news article. George and his entire gang had been arrested. Turns out, they had been caught at the airport the day before they were set to leave the country. The police moved in swiftly. And all 7 members were taken into custody. Not a single one escaped. As the ringleader, George was facing serious charges, likely a heavy sentence. Even through the pixelated photos in the report, I recognized a few familiar faces. One of them was the guy who had sat next to me at Anna's second wedding. Now that's a perfect ending, I muttered. Chris, thanks to the airtight evidence he provided, even received a Citizen's Bravery Award. It put him in the spotlight for a while. And with that, he decided to leave private investigation behind. Instead, he took the bar exam and became a lawyer. Being a detective meant dealing with the dirtiest sides of humanity. I'd rather stand in the light and uphold the law. I didn't mind the change. If anything, I was happy for him. As for me, I had started dating Emily. She was a divorcee with a daughter. I had a son. Together, we made a perfect little family of 4. One evening, while we were on a family trip, Emily suddenly grabbed my arm, grinning. Henry, check this out. You've been worried about Anna's visitation rights, right? Well, here's your solution. She showed me a public case file. I glanced at it and nearly burst out laughing. It turned out George's gang hadn't just been 7 people. There was one more, someone who had applied to join just before they were supposed to leave the country. To prove their worth, that new recruit had illegally obtained and sold personal data. That recruit? Anna. I couldn't help but laugh. A criminal record? That's more than enough to prove she's unfit for visitation. As the sky darkened, I pulled Emily into my arms and kissed her. Everything had finally fallen into place. On the day George and Anna were sent to prison, I made a point to go see them one last time. Both were dressed in prison uniforms, their expressions hollow, devoid of life. I stood at a distance, watching as the guards escorted them inside. For a fleeting moment, my mind conjured an image of them on their wedding day, George in his suit, Anna in her gown. Back then, one was a predator, the other his prey. They were never truly meant for each other. But now, standing side by side in chains, they finally looked like a perfect match. The heavy iron doors slowly swung shut. I let out a deep breath, my emotions a tangled mess. There was a hint of sorrow, but also a quiet satisfaction. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Henry, where did you run off to? Get back here right now. Your son just got smacked by your daughter, and I'm about to lose my mind. If you don't get home soon, don't even think about sleeping in our bed tonight, enjoy the couch. I stared at the screen, then let out a soft chuckle. Shaking my head, I slipped into the driver's seat, turned the key, and started the engine. Time to go home.